steps, but I've gotten used to it already. Okay, so let's pick up from where we left off yesterday. We were saying the different levels of tzedakah. The highest level of tzedakah, this is all from the Rambam, who gets it from the Gemara. He says that the highest level is where a person supports another Jew by allowing him to sustain himself, okay? So that he doesn't need, and that's also fulfillment of the commandment of the hechazakta bo, give him strength. In other words, if you are the cause of another Jew to become self-sustaining, that's the highest level of tzedakah. Okay, next level. Pachos mizeh, anosein tzedakah la'ani v'lo yada lami nosein v'lo yada ha'ani mimi mekabel. Where you give tzedakah to a poor person where neither party knows who the other party is. The giver doesn't know who the recipient is, the recipient doesn't know who the giver. That's where we talked about the shul's tzedakah fund, is an example of that, where the giver doesn't know. The karav lazeh, anosin l'kupa shel tzedakah. So close to this, in other words, a way of fulfilling this is putting money in the pushka. V'lo yitein adam l'kupa shel tzedakah, ela im ken yodeya shehamamuna aleha ne'eman v'yodeya linhog bo keshura. A person should not put money in the pushka unless he knows that whoever's in charge of it knows how to handle the tzedakah properly. He's quoting from the Shulchan Aruch. Now, does a person have to suspect that maybe, I guess if you wanted to give a major gift, don't take a wad of cash and put it in the pushka in the shul that you've never been to, right? Or that where you don't know who's in charge of the pushka. Right, but to put in a daily amount is fine. I can tell you that in our pushka, we have gaboim in each minyan, collect the money usually on a daily basis, drop the money in the chute, and that leads into the office. The office collects it, counts it, deposits it in the bank, and then it goes into a segregated account called the Bayit Charity Fund. I think they take off. It's either 5% or 10% for administrivia. And then the rest of it goes to a fund that I alone have administration over, where I give the accounting office a list of who should get distributions before every major yontif. Yeah. Right. So in most shuls, the pushka goes to the shul. In our shul, that's not the case. Okay. Mostly to people, almost exclusively to individuals. Once in a while, we'll give, I can tell you, let's say, we give a small amount to an organization called Yad Eliezer, which gives to the poor in Israel. And we give another small amount to an organization called Od Yosef Chai, also gives money to the poor in Israel. We do that on poor. Yeah, it's exclusively. I think once in a while we'll use it if there's a shortfall in a program. I think I probably use maybe up to $2,000 a year from that fund. I may use for funding certain things that in the shul where there's no one who's allocated funds for it, but it's again a relatively small amount. Our fund usually manages about $100,000 a year in tzedakah. From the pushkas, from the Rosh Chodesh fund, and from people sending in donations. Maybe it's 80. Yeah. Maybe it's $80,000 a year. I'm not sure. Yeah. You can make a nice living. Okay. Right now, I want you to think about it for a second. We have four. We used to have 5. Now we have 4 minyanim a day for shacharis. We have 2 minyanim a day for mincha and ma'ariv. So how many you have on average? I'd say what, 25 people per minyan, 25, 30, sometimes more. Each person, let's say you get 20 people a day, each minyan putting in $1. Okay. So let's say that's 6 times a week. Okay. 120 a day per minyan. So then, sometimes 4.
If you get 20 people putting in $1 each minimum.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
It's 150,000.
Okay. So
80,000. We got to get people to contribute more.
that's right. So,
You won't even notice. It's a good idea.
right. So in other words, it's not hard to reach that
No.
amount when you have
No.
that number of people that are putting money in the pushka every day.
Yeah, but it's probably not that people are putting in $1. They're probably. That's all you have. You've got to limit these things. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But it's not hard to get to 80 or 100,000 is basically your point. Which is true.
And then added to that, we do a campaign before Purim, before Pesach, and before Rosh Hashanah. Please contribute to the charity fund so we can make distributions. So I know that I will go online and make a special distribution of a few $100, just myself. I put it in the tzedakah fund. Yeah, yeah. Well, for Purim, Matanos Levyonim, for Pesach, Mos Chitim. Basically say, listen, if you put into this fund, the money is going to people in our community, many of whom are members of the shul, who could actually use a leg up, use a hand, making Pesach. And we have people on that list who have been receiving for years, just because they're on a fixed income, and it's very difficult for them to make ends meet. Right? So the only person who knows the identity of these people is myself and somebody in the accounting office who's not a member of our community, right? That they prepare the checks. I don't, and perhaps there's 2 signatories on every check. I don't sign the checks. And you're supposed to do that in order to have checks and balances. Yeah. I don't sign the checks. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and I think we'll learn about that when we go into Hilchos Tzedakah, how a Gabbai Tzedakah is supposed to comport himself to make sure that he doesn't open himself up to accusation. Okay, so the next level, Pachos Mizeh, Sheyodea Hanosein Leminosein V'lo Yodea Hani Mimi Lokeach, where the next level below that is where the giver knows the identity of the recipient, but the recipient does not know the identity of the giver. Kigon Gedolei HaChachamim Sheyoholchim B'Seiser Umashlichim HaMaot B'Pitchei Haniyim. There's a story of Mar Zutra in the Gemara in Kesubos, who used to he had this one man that he would go and put on a cloak and drop off money on his doorstep and would run away before the guy could open the door. The Gemara relates the story that one day this poor man decided to try and find out who the guy was and try to catch him because he wanted to say thank you. But Mar Zutra was with his wife and they ran off. The guy ran after them and said, wait. And so they actually ran and hid inside a furnace. But the problem was there was still a hot furnace. And so a miracle was performed for Mar Zutra's wife, because her feet were not getting singed by the coals at all. So she told her husband, put your feet on my feet so your feet don't get singed. So he couldn't understand. He says, how come you get more of a miracle than I do? So she said, because when I give to the poor, I prepare food for them. You just give them cash. So, yeah. So that, with your gift, they have to go out, buy the food, cook the food. I take care of them completely. Okay. The kachroi lasos im ein hamununim al hatzdaka noagim kishur. So he says, that's really if you don't have confidence in the people who are giving out tzedakah, you don't want to use a middleman. So that would be the way that you should do it, which is where you give you drop off the money to them without them knowing your identity. B'chein hanotein matana la'ani b'li lo hudiya lo shehi mikesef shel tzedakah. Another example of where the recipient doesn't know the identity of the giver is if you give someone a gift without notifying them that it's tzedakah. In other words, let's say a guy is selling paper clips on the side of the road, and he's a member of your kehillah, and you've got paper clips up to the wazoo because you've been buying more paper clips from him than you know what to do with, right? What? That's right. But he thinks that you're giving him parnasa from the paper clips because he has the best paper clips in the whole city. And you're basically just giving him money so that he will have what to have a parnasa from. You make him feel like $1 million because he thinks that he's an enterprising businessman, right? So that would be another way of giving tzedakah in such a way where the recipient is unaware. He's aware that you're giving him money, but he doesn't realize it's for tzedakah. That's also part of this level. And even after the gift, you don't have to notify him that it's from tzedakah money. And so that's actually considered to be a superior way of giving tzedakah. The next level down, pachot mizeh, sheyodea ha'ani mimi notel, v'lo yodea hanoten lemi noten, where the poor person knows who the donor is, but the donor does not know the recipient. Kagon ha'chachamim shayu tzorim ha'maot b'sad dinehem, u'mashlichan otan la'achoreihem, u'boyin ha'aniyim b'nolim kadei shelo tiyeh lem busha. So the Gemara relates that there was one Talmud Chacham who used to take wads of cash. I guess they were like little bags of money because they didn't have paper money back then. And they would throw the money behind them while they were walking, knowing that the poor were there to collect tzedakah money. So they didn't allow themselves to turn around to see who was picking up the money. But anytime that you can, and there the recipient knows who the donor is, but the donor does not know the recipient. Now, pachot mizeh, sheyitain la'ani biyado kodem sheyishal, is where the giver and the receiver know the identity of each other, but the giver gives to the poor person before he even asks. Pachot mizeh, sheyitain lo kiroi achar sheyishal. The level below that is where the guy asks and you give him what an appropriate amount for his needs. Pachot mizeh sheyitin lo pachot meharoi v'sever panim yafos. The level lower than that is you give him a pittance of a gift, but you do it with a kindly countenance, right? And pachot mizeh sheyitin lo be'etzev. And the lowest level of tzedakah is you give a guy a gift with a scowl, right? In other words, begrudgingly and whatever. Okay, next. Yesh misha oser lahatrim bishvil tzedakah biyeshivot uvekololim be'emtza hasedarim mishom bittul Torah derabim. He says some people hold that you're not allowed to collect tzedakah funds for yeshivas and kololim in the middle of the learning seder, because that's going to cause bittul Torah. Whereas you can't go around in the Beis Medrash and start collecting tzedakah, even if it's for the yeshiva itself, if it's going to cause bittul Torah. Va'af tzibur halomdim ein lahem lahapsik mitalmudam kedei latei tzedakah. And this includes any Jewish community that is in the middle of its Torah study session, like if there's like a Beis Medrash evening, or the Kollel has an open night learning, right? And people are coming there to learn b'chavrusa, to hear a shir, and someone figures, well, listen, this is a great time for me to collect tzedakah because everyone's there, and I can get everyone's attention. So he goes around the Beis Medrash shaking the coins to collect tzedakah. He says, there are poskim who say that you're not allowed to do that because you're causing bittul Torah. V'yesh misha oser, rakim efshar lahatrim lifnei o acharei haseder, v'yesh misha matir b'chol ofan. Other poskim are more lenient, and they will argue that it's only forbidden to interrupt a seder of learning if you had the opportunity to stand at the door as people are coming in and out, and you don't need to interrupt them. But some say that it's always mutter. Who's he quoting here? Quoting Rav Chaim Kanievsky. There's what you see from here is that there's different attitudes, even among the poskim, as far as whether or not you can interrupt a person doing a mitzvah like Talmud Torah. But we'll talk about tefillah in a minute also. Can you interrupt people's studies in order to collect tzedakah? Yeah. Well, that's why where you daven when they come in and out during davening. Yeah, we have a policy here also. We don't permit it. Yeah. And that I think is the correct thing to do.
Stand at the door, which is okay.
That's fine.
When you're walking.
Yeah, you give when you're walking in, you give when you're walking out. What a lot of people do is when they daven in a minyan where people are walking in and out during minyan, they'll put, like you said, a pile of shekels, or and basically, yeah, the mashulach can come and take it, self-serve. Okay. Tov lateit pruta le'ani lifnei kol tefillah. It is appropriate to give a coin to an ani before each prayer service. Shenemar ani b'tzedek echezeh fanecha. Because there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says that I will gaze upon your face through tzedek. So through tzedakah, I will be able to look upon you, O God. In other words, I will be able to approach you because I already gave tzedakah. Pruta is a minimal coin. That's what the word pruta means. It's the lowest coin denomination in the times of the Gemara. Yeah, I mean a pruta is about 5 cents, right? V'nagu b'kama kihilos latzeit l'kupat hatzdaka kishamagim l'pasuk v'hosher v'chachavod milafonech. Some people have a minhag that when they get to the part in Psukei de Zimra, in by Yevarech David, towards the end of Psukei de Zimra, where it says V'osher kavod milafonecha v'atama shel bakol, right? That all wealth and glory comes from you, Hashem. So that is the appropriate time to give your pruta, to give your coin to the pushka, because you're basically acknowledging that wealth comes from God, and that makes it easier for a person to part with his coin. There's actually a whole protocol that's brought down in some svarim, especially I think it's from the Ben Ish Chai and other Svardish poskim, how you're supposed to hold the coin and use certain fingers to give the coin, like based on Kabbalah. But we don't practice that way. Okay. Now, be'es chazarat hashatz u'kriyat Torah, lo tov le'esof nidavot. He says during the repetition of the Shemona Esrei and during Kriyas Torah, it's not proper to collect tzedakah. Ki al yedei zeh mevatlim lishmoa chazaras hashatz u'kriyas Torah. va'aniyas baruch hu es Hashem, because through that, people are not going to listen to chazaras hashatz. They're not going to listen to the Torah reading, and they're not going to listen to the person getting the aliyah saying baruch hu es Hashem. V'chein b'sha'ar mekomot she'asur lahafsik, lo tov la'esov. Similarly, in other places during davening where you're not supposed to speak, it's not proper at that point in the davening, whether it's during Psukei D'Zimra or Birchas Kriya Shema, to collect tzedakah. Ki bazeh mafriyim la'mitpalalim li'itpalel b'kavana. Because at that point, it's a disturbance. You're disturbing the people who would like to be able to daven with kavana. And some people couldn't care less because they're not davening with kavana. But there are people who would really like to be able to stay focused. And when a person walks by and is asking for money, it's actually an interruption. Like, I'm talking to God. Why, first of all, I'm putter from giving tzedakah at that moment because of the principle as oseg b'mitzvah putter min mitzvah. And so I don't have to give you. But more than that, it's not appropriate for you to try and interrupt and pull me away from my davening.
A lot of times they come in and ashrei, is that less?
I mean, at the end of davening,
Yeah.
that's fine because you're allowed to speak at that point. A person still has a right to say, "Excuse me, I'd like to focus on my ashrei," right? But it's the least worst place to interrupt, right? Because at least at that point you're allowed to speak. Okay. Kisheba ani be'emtza psuki d'zimra uve'emtza birchot kriyat shema, yesh mi sheposek shemuter latet lo. He says when a poor person comes in to the shul in the middle of psuki d'zimra or the blessings of the Shema, there are those who say that you're still allowed to give him. Kol makom adif lahachin matbeot liyado kidei sheha'ani yikachem me'atzmo v'lo yafriya lo. But it's better even to put the coins on the table next to you, so that the poor person will be able to self-service and not bother you. And some say that you're not even allowed to give when you're at that point in davening, because you're engaged in a mitzvah, so you're patur from all other mitzvot at that moment. And some say that you're exempt from giving him only if it's a disturbance for you, like only if it's really an interruption. And there are those who paskin that despite the fact that you are patur, you still have permission to give him if you want to, and it's not considered to be a hefsek. V'nohagu lahakya, and minhag is to be lenient. Well, that's his minhag to be lenient. I don't think that you can say that it's everyone's minhag to be lenient.
But you're in a shul where
Correct. Yesh mi sheposek shebe'emtza kriya shema lo rak shepatur latet elagam isura avid. Now, if you're in the middle of kriya shema, right, with the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, there are those who say that not only are you exempt, but you're not allowed to give. In other words, under any conditions. And that, to me, makes the most sense, because you're not even allowed to make gestures or facial acknowledgements to someone when you're in the middle of Kriya Shema. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch says that you're not allowed to wink, you're not allowed to nod, you're not allowed to smile at someone when you're focused in the middle of Kriya Shema. Here, I'll show you what it's. The Amida is of course that as well, but in other words, that goes without saying. I think that's why he doesn't even say that, because it's clear that you can't interrupt your Amida. I'll show you. No. You can't even, you're not supposed to even stand up. No. Here we go. Or Chaim.
Not the id, something.
If they were that important, I would think it was last.
Yeah, okay. So in Siman Samech Aleph, let's see. Let's say. Here. Here it is. Hakore Kriya Shema, lo yirmos be'ena, velo yikrotz bisvasav, velo yar'e be'etzvosav. One who's in the middle of reciting the Shema should not single with one's eyes, mouth with one's lips, or gesture with one's fingers during the first paragraph, which is the main acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, because then he appears like he's reading it casually. And it is written, V'dibartabam. And we explain this to mean do them permanently, speak them in a formal, non-casual way. So if I'm not mistaken, if we take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, Mishnah Berurah says, he says, V'yesh machmirim gam b'parsha shniya. He says other people are machmir, not only the first paragraph, but the second paragraph as well. Ach lidvar mitzvah l'kuli alma mutar lirmos b'parsha shniya. He says, but for a mitzvah, you are allowed to make gestures with your eyes. Avol lahafstik lehedjilo, but you certainly can't interrupt with speech. So you really are not supposed to make any interruptions, at all, even gestures. Certainly not during the first paragraph of the Shema. Okay. We'll just finish this off. Mashenogim lakabil alatzmam lateit tzedakah b'shvil meitim b'shadas karas neshamos minhag vatikinhu umahani l'nishmoseim. This is coming up on Shavuos. People have a minhag to accept upon themselves or to make a pledge for tzedakah during Yizkar when they make mention of their deceased relatives. This is a very old minhag, and it's considered to be helpful for the souls of the departed. And this is brought down in the Ramah. Okay, so that concludes chapter 9 of our discussion. And Mirza Hashem, we will pick this up next week. All right, so let me, oh, that's right, it's Tuesday, it's because we have a statutory holiday. So we'll just be learning 3 days next week. The Victoria Day. So we'll pick it up on Tuesday. We'll learn Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then it'll be Yontif. So everyone have a great day, and a good Erev Shabbos. And welcome to